Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers monthly meeting.
Get a little closer.
Okay, I'll get it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arkansas. No, just let's don't try to ask people to be.
volume up.
Testing, testing, testing.
Does it work? Okay, good.
Just got to speak louder.
The very purpose of an organization like this is for people to get together and talk. And that's probably more important than anything I've got to say.
I got you. Speak close to the microphone and loudly. That'll keep it.
Well,
That'll cool it down.
but the thing about it is, let's talk about first.
Yeah.
First, these people have made their place available to us. They're still talking, they're still having a good time. The point of organizations like this is for people to get together and have a good time.
Then we need to go.
No. What we need to do is I'm sure that they're winding down. But it's up to you guys.
Well, I say we go ahead and get started, but with the volume really low, you'll. I kind of expected
Can you close this door?
Yeah, let's do that.
That might seem
Pitch off just a little bit.
but I do not want to alienate people who are doing this.
I don't know what's going on with the sound.
Okay. Hit play on the laptop. Okay. Hang on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers monthly meeting. The Arkansas Society of Freethinkers is a nonprofit organization devoted to maintaining the separation between religion and state, advocating a scientific and humanistic viewpoint, and improving the lives of non-believers. You can learn more about ASF by picking up one of the flyers available at the back table or on the web at arfreethinkers.org, or the most reliable way by getting to know the members and organizers around you. I think you all know where the restrooms are. They're on the other side of the curtains and back in the corner. Now for our standard disclaimer. ASF is a diverse organization with members who represent a wide range of opinions. The speakers who present at our monthly meetings do not necessarily represent the views of ASF or its individual members. Because we are a 501c3 organization, ASF cannot directly support candidates for public office, but we can advocate for causes such as separation of church and state, scientific literacy, and societal progress, and truthful communication. That being said, we next have Bern Bradley, I believe, who will present our free thought of the day. Please give a warm welcome to Bern. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, Dawn is doing free thoughts. So Dawn Guerra will do the free thought of the day.
Jerry, don't go that way.
All right. Let's try that.
Tripwires.
Too much tripwires. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon. Respects. On this date, in 1866, freethinker Voltairine de Cleyre was born in Leslie, Michigan, to French immigrant Hector and Harriet de Cleyre. Her father, a struggling tailor and admirer of Voltaire, coined her name Voltairine. By age 19, she had declared herself a freethinker, marking the moment with a poem and pledging to consecrate my service to the world. In 1886, she became editor of the Progressive Age in Grand Rapids. The next year, she launched a lecture tour before free thought groups. Tall, slim, with arresting features, blue eyes and curly brown hair, she must have made an impression with her version in a Greek toga. The execution of 4 innocent anarchists in 1887 for the Haymarket bombing was a turning point for her. She dedicated herself to anarchism, but in every speech and article that she wrote, she talked about politics and feminism. She always included freethinker views. She set off on her lecture tour in Kansas for the Women's National Liberation Union and founded Related League in Philadelphia, lecturing on such topics as sex slavery. She lived meagerly by teaching immigrants and translating. She became pregnant by freethinker James B. Eliot and gave birth to their son Harry in June of 1890. She and Eliot agreed that Harry would live with Eliot and she would have no part in his upbringing. Interesting. In 1902, a deranged former pupil of hers shot her 4 times at close range. She survived and was back on the lecture circuit within 3 months. She even raised defense funds for her perpetrator, whom she called the product of a diseased brain. In an eloquent essay, she decried punishment and imprisonment for its own sake, holding Christianity accountable for the new class of imbruted men. De Clare, long plagued by sinus problems, fell ill again in April of 1912 and died of septic meningitis 9 weeks later, after 2 operations, at the age of 45. She was buried in Waldheim Cemetery next to the graves of those Haymarket anarchists as 20,000 people gathered. And her quote that I love, "The question of souls is old. We demand our bodies now. We are tired of promises. God is deaf, and his church, our worst enemy." Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. And one of the key functions of ASF is to help freethinkers make friends and connections. Please turn to the people on your left and your right and introduce yourself to them. Misinformation and pseudoscience are everywhere. Our misinformation today helps us. I really blew that, didn't I? Start again. Our misinformation of the day feature, which is not what we call it, helps us to develop the critical thinking skills we need and to exist in the modern world without being duped. Please give a round of applause to, it's saying me, but I think it's actually Byrne, who will deliver today's Skeptical Sidebar.
Thank you, Jerry. How many of you recycle plastic? How much plastic in the United States do you think actually gets recycled? 5%. According to National Geographic, it's 6%. And another source that I don't remember now said that of what you put in the can, only about 10% of that actually gets recycled. It's a waste. It's a waste of time and effort to do it because it's just not helping anything. There's a very good article on earthday.org that talks about this, and the title of the article is "Recycling Plastic is a Lie." It's a lie that was perpetrated by the petroleum industry because they did not want to stop making plastic, so they've invented this. And I'm using that as an example of We like to say in this group that we follow the science, we follow reason and logic, and we don't always. I recycle plastic. I do. I put it out there all the time. I think I'm getting the stuff that's most likely to be recycled, but I don't really know that for sure. I wanted to give you a couple of examples of where groups that I'm involved in actually do follow the science. When COVID hit and the pandemic was widespread, my hiking group had to decide, are we still going to walk or not? Fortunately, we had a lawyer in the group who didn't know anything about medicine, but had gone to school with a woman who became a scientist. And she was a scientist at a lab in Maryland. And she was one of the people who had to give thumbs up before Moderna could enter phase 3 testing for their vaccine. And so he contacted her, and she said, I don't care what anybody else is saying. This is the real skinny. If you're outdoors and you're 2 feet apart, you don't need to wear a mask. If you got someone who is absolutely vitally susceptible to something, you might want to. But other than that, don't, because it's useless and it'll make you breathe harder. It'll make it tougher on you to walk. So we followed her advice. Followed her advice for over a year, and one person in our group got COVID, and he got it from the office, and he got it from the office from the boss who knew she had COVID because she tested positive for it, but did not accept the idea that the test was accurate and came to work anyway. The board of directors for the Arkansas Society of Free Thinkers had a decision to make when we stopped having public meetings, and that was, when are we going to start again? And so we discussed, Ann Orsi was a big part of this, and we decided that we would follow the lead of the UUC because we felt like they had looked at things and decided that this is it. And I believe it was 14% increase in new cases. Is that right? I think that's right. That we would see what was happening in our county, in Pulaski County. And when the increase in new cases was below 14%, we'd start meeting in person again. That happened, and a lot of us didn't feel like it was really time to start meeting again. But what held sway with everyone was when we were thinking about it clearly, and we were looking at what the science said, and we were looking at what the medical people said, we decided that 14% was the number, and we started meeting again. And that's what we did, and to my knowledge, we didn't have anyone come down with COVID from here. So when you say you're going to follow the science, you ought to follow the science. Thanks.
Another feature on this list that I'm reading from is the member story, but I don't believe there is one, except I think there is. I think Bern just gave it to us because that was a good combination, skeptical sidebar and member story. Now, our big meeting, that's what we're doing today, offers you the chance to have your voice heard. Talk to us. If you would like to deliver the free thought of the day, misinformation moment, skeptical sidebar, member story, if you have something to share, ASF is here to empower you. Okay, now I'd like to start. I think Chris and Jim are going to talk a little bit about their experience at Oasis. So I'd like you to all give a long, good applause for Chris and Jim.
How is everybody today? Good, good. So, let me get situated here. What we learned at Kansas City. Let me introduce this with some basic backstory. I got involved with the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers back in 2008 when I was just a mere small fry. Back then, it was it was kind of mostly a different set of folks, and it was like a library meeting room, And I don't even remember how I heard about it. Maybe the internet was around back then, but it was something that had never really existed before. Little Rock had never seen anything like it. And so we had this group of people who were, openly free thinkers, which was edgy at the time, right? That was really forward thinking and really, kind of wild. And, once you get a group like that together, and we had, speakers, it was a completely different format, of course, but we did things like that, and there were also, some of the early organizers set up things, like restaurant nights and bar nights and walks and book club and things like that. But the question was always in the back of my mind, kind of, where could this go? Where are we going with this? Because when we look around us in central Arkansas here, it's kind of a social desert, really. It's like, this is something that people from out of state comment on when they move here. It's like you can, join a right-wing church, or you can sit at home staring at a screen all your life. And those are your choices, right? And so this was something different, and I was excited about ASF, and I was like, this could really be something because it fills a need that people have. And it also could grow, it could metastasize. We, set up branches and groups in other towns and other areas of town. There is no real upper limit to where this could go in terms of changing the overall culture of everything around us. Anything with that much possibility deserves to be explored, in my mind. It's kind of like, stumbling across a potential cure for cancer. You do go down that road when you find it. And I think our society desperately needs a cure for something. So that's why, I've devoted a lot of my time since then to ASF and finding out what works. And in terms of being evidence-driven, in terms of always, looking to experience and figuring out, what actually works in the real world, like Bern was talking about, I think, we do have to look at what works and what doesn't in terms of generating the energy within the group, helping, draw in new people, and being an attractive experience that people want to get involved with and contribute back to, because it makes their lives better. A lot of the struggles that we've had over the years, and a lot of the back and forth over different priorities, came from trying to find that pathway, trying to find that path to growth and to success as an organization. And at some point, a lot of institutions and businesses use a technique called benchmarking to help find the way. What is the way to be successful? Well, what are the most successful organizations out there doing right now? What are our competitors doing? If they're outgrowing us, how are they running their business? If the statistics at another institution are better than ours, well, what can we learn from them to bring home to our organization? That's being evidence-driven. That's being empirical, right? And so when you're, when you have an organization and you want to find that path that leads to growth and success and eventually the goals of the organization, you got to be, tied into what's actually happening in the real world. So a lot of people, I think, have over time come into ASF. They've seen that we've had a really kind of slow growth rate, and I'm not afraid to admit that. We have not met our own expectations. We have not succeeded to the extent of our, desires and dreams. We've not been able to fulfill our mission because we're having trouble generating that enthusiasm, that energy, and getting started up in a world where social organizations are already dying out and having kind of a mass extinction event as we all spend more and more time on our little friends in our pockets. So when I found out in about 2016 or so about an organization, I was visiting Houston, and I pulled up meetup.com to see what kind of free thought groups were around there. I was interested in new ideas. I was interested in being exposed to what others are doing, and I wanted to see if there was a meetup that I could attend. And so I found one, and I just picked it at random and dropped into it, leaving my poor family behind. And I was amazed, because I walked into this community center, kind of found where it was, and a greeter greeted me and, showed me where we were going. And in that room, there were 100 people, 100 freethinkers. And I was like, whoa. So I stayed for the program. I talked to everybody I could talk to, probably a little too much. But I learned something. I learned a lot and brought home some of the basic tactics of what I saw there that had been successful in Houston. But there were some things I didn't get. There were some things I did not comprehend about that organization just from attending a meeting, and how I didn't get what was working behind the scenes. So I've learned, you can read about a different country. You can read about what Germany or Greece is like, or Mexico, or anywhere else, but you don't really know it until you go there. Everything you could possibly read or watch on video is in some sense a misrepresentation of what your actual experience would be like being there. And it doesn't matter how much you read, write, or absorb, you have to go there. You just have to go. And so that's what happened in August of this year when Jim and I went to Kansas City. So Oasis Network on their website describes himself as a place for like-minded individuals and families to connect, to be inspired and feel empowered. Every Sunday morning we offer you the chance to get together to discuss real-world principles supported by evidence and free thought, not scripture or revelation. Furthermore, we provide a place where your children can explore their developing worldviews, ask questions, and make friends in an environment that's supportive of critical thinking. So, and also you'll find on oasisnetwork.com, Oasis is based on these 5 core values. People are more important than beliefs. Reality is known through reason. Meaning comes from making a difference. Human hands solve human problems. Be accepting and be accepted. And this is really like the Constitution. This is like, maybe you work for a business that has a mission statement and it's lofty and high ideals, but they don't really follow it. But this is actually, their core. This is actually what drives the behavior within the group. This is the social contract that people within the group used to interact with each other. And this social contract helps them to get along a little better, and it avoids so many problems like some of us are aware of, that we've seen in an organization that does not have a banner up all the time with the 5 values. They also have a code of conduct, which is a difference between our organization, and you can find it on their website. But basically, it's like 4 pages long, but in a nutshell, no harassment, no discrimination. Don't come in here and be disruptive. Protect the privacy of participants, and no illegal activity. But it also has kind of a method about what will happen if the rules are broken. Usually it involves like a board member confronting the person, asking them to stop doing that, and that can be the end of it. If not, then maybe the person's asked to leave. And if there's still a problem, maybe they're just persona non grata at some point. And that may seem cold to some of us, but that's what it means to actually have rules and enforce them, and to protect the interests of everyone else. So here's what's interesting about Oasis as an organizational model. They've got 11 chapters that meet physically, kind of like what we're doing today. And they've got 1 online gaming chapter. They're growing, and they've spread across the United States and into Canada in about the past decade or so. And this is really interesting, because here's something that's growing. Here's something that we want to benchmark onto, right? What are they doing that we can learn from to be more successful as our own organization? And how are they, what have they come up with that is alien to us in terms of how things are done, so that we need to reframe our thought process? So the closest Oases to us, Oases, is Kansas City, or Houston is about equidistance here from Little Rock. There's also one in Topeka, Kansas. So if you're ever in those towns, or ever in, any of these other places, Salt Lake City, San Diego, there's a spot in Virginia, be sure and look on meetup.com to see if they're having a meetup so that you can drop in and experience it as well. So, back in June of this year, ASF tabled at the Secular Student Alliance Conference. The national conference was held in Little Rock. Any of y'all remember that? Yeah, so we tabled and we donated some money and we were there, and I even gave a workshop. But across from us was the Oasis table, and I got to talk to them. They'd sent an emissary, a diplomat, a representative, and there was also Daryl Ray there. Anybody know who Daryl Ray is? Daryl Ray is the founder of Recovering from Religion. He's written several books on it. Sex and God and The God Virus come to mind. But yeah, he's a counselor by trade who has developed this organizational model to really help people through religious trauma. And he happens to live just outside of Kansas City there. And he's just we're just chit-chatting there at the Secular Student Alliance Conference, and he's like, yeah, why don't y'all come, visit us, and I'll put you up, you can stay. I've got 2 spare bedrooms, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, seriously? 'Cause I might take you up on that, just a warning. He's like, yeah, I'm serious, come on up. I was like, okay. So I kind of arranged things, to see who else was interested, and a 6.5-hour road trip across a 2-day weekend. It was just a hard sell, let me tell you. But Jim was up for it, so we took off on this road trip from North Little Rock to Kansas City, and we stayed with Daryl and his wife, and he invited a bunch of people over that night, and we learned an extraordinary amount. I was sitting there at kind of a wine and cheese and beer party in his little pavilion out in his backyard with actually a notepad, like writing stuff down like some sort of organizational structure nerd. And so yeah, there's our little party. There's me and the side there, but yeah, this is the folks that he invited over, and a diverse crowd. We had a really good time, just kind of hanging out. And you realize that all these folks know each other very well, and this is not like let's get together and gripe about the world situation. This is like they talk about each other's lives. They talk about things that are going on. They've got all these inside jokes. It's a tight-knit group that a lot of us maybe in our lives have never experienced or lacked. And so that was really interesting to me. By the way, this is kind of a photo essay more than anything. And then, on Sunday morning, we, got up and got moving and went over to, the Oasis building. That's right, I said that. They have a building. They purchased this old church, and they fixed it up, and basically they figured out a way that, one of their members could lease it back to them, and eventually they could pay it off and own it. So here you have it's not the first secular organization to have their own building, but it's one of the few who have gotten to a point of organization and size that they are able to maintain this kind of budget and maintain this kind of dedication and interest. And again, this tells you that you're in the right spot in terms of benchmarking. I believe the Ethical Society in Pittsburgh, maybe, or Philadelphia, also has their own building, and there's maybe a couple of other sort of places. FFRF has offices up in Madison, Wisconsin, but this is a meeting hall for a social group that they have bought with their own money. So here's Jim and me standing by their sign. Oh, by the way, I had a broken hand during this, but it's funny, they put their sign up and they got ready and all that stuff, and they kept having people walk in because the building is an ex-church, and the name Oasis doesn't communicate what it is or it isn't. They had people walking in with maybe incorrect expectations. So they put a secular community of compassion and reason on top of it to summarize, in a nutshell, that's the elevator speech of what they are. And that was interesting too. Here's more views of the building. Real nice, I'm guessing 1940s structure. A lot of classic charm there. And, largely devoid of most markings. You kind of walk in. It's not real accessible. You walk right upstairs to begin with, but then you have people who are there working as greeters, and they've got a table where you've got name badges. You can select a red name badge if you do not want to be, outed as being there. I didn't really see a lot of red name badges. Like I said, ASF, it was edgy back in '08. I don't think it's so edgy now, and I don't think that people are quite as shy, but there are people who face discrimination in their lives, so that option has to be there. Here's the little fundraising corner where you can, pick up some t-shirts and whatnot, swag. I almost did. And look at how organized the volunteers list is. They have all these roles. Every week somebody has to do all this stuff, and there's kind of a sign-up sheet that people do online, and they fill these roles and make it happen every week. We meet once a month, and that seems like a lot of work to me, but many hands make for light work, and so once you get that energy going, and that's why we're talking about energy here. We're not talking about we ought to's. We're talking about energy. What actually works to get people motivated to sign up for this and to help out in their own little ways. None of these jobs are huge. That's important, I think, but it's also that once you generate that energy, it's easy to fill all these little jobs that together add up to a lot and make it where it can be covered on a week after week basis, no matter what. So yeah, this is kind of like a foyer / before the meeting area, and they've got a nice space there. They're real big on donuts and coffee in this particular culture. One key difference is they meet up at 11 a.m. instead of 1 p.m. like we're doing, so it's kind of in the morning still, and this is where you can come and get your morning coffee. And they picked a time that is probably most popular for everyone. You don't have to get out of bed early, and you still have the afternoon. It doesn't bust up your day like our current time does. If you pivot and turn toward the main meeting area, that's what it looks like. Really an ideal setup for what they have going on. And of course, we're here early, so we're kind of just snapping pictures of the facilities. There's the inside of the facilities. Over there to the right by that camera is kind of like what Brian's doing in the back, doing the AV work. They have a much different setup than us, but they do pretty much the same thing. So a lot of commonalities with ASF, a lot of similarities that on the surface you think, okay, what's the difference between this organization and that one? And the difference, that we're looking for is what are the keys to success and what are the keys to growth. So in the back of the building, they have this area which is for childcare. They have a childcare volunteer who, can take care of the kids so you can focus on the talk and whatever. And that volunteer is, vetted with a background check. It's a very carefully organized situation, and nobody's allowed in that room except for the people who are vetted volunteers for childcare. So this is pictures taken through the door. There's the AV crew setting up to stream online and to make videos. You can go to these YouTube sites and watch what they've got going on. There's the view of the back of the greeting table. Like I said, they've got people to greet so that when a stranger comes up, they're immediately greeted. They're no longer a stranger. Here's where it's starting to fill up, and they're starting to get started. It was actually a low turnout day on the day that we went. They usually pack this place, but one of the first things they do, remember those 5 values. They bring that up. They remind each other this is how we are expecting each other to act in this context. When you come in and put on your Oasis hat, you are agreeing to uphold these values. And interestingly, they are much more musical than we are. They find a musical act every week. And every week they've got people who are out there scouring looking for musicians that are interested in making $100, and they find musicians and they fill that spot. And it's usually a solo or a duo kind of artist, because that's you're not going to set up a whole band on the cheap that way, but it's kind of that was kind of an intimidating thing to me. Like, oh my gosh, you've got to schedule an act every week. How do y'all manage that? And I wonder, does that translate if you don't have somebody in your group that is really connected to the music scene? Well, eventually word gets around and this becomes like a thing that you can book people out weeks in advance. And it's just basically some volunteer gets started on this project and gets the bookings done. And so live music is actually a key draw of what they're doing here. It's kind of like a live music group. They're talking about birthdays, like, we sort of struggle to get the basics done, and they're able to talk about whose birthday it is, and that shows kind of the more personal nature of Oasis, and kind of the more close-knit groups. It's like, hey, I'll remember to tell so-and-so that happy birthday. Community groups, right? So this organization is all about getting close to other people, and to do that, they need some structure, but also community groups, that's kind of like, a handful of people who don't know each other agree to have meetups. And after, a season, like, maybe 5 or 6 meetups at somebody's house, they know each other really, really well. And so this is kind of a way to introduce new people. Maybe you're new to town. Maybe you just had to travel there for work. And you walk in, you got this opportunity to make 5 close friends, just like that. Just jumpstart your social life as if it was a car battery. They also do a nonprofit work, like they call it volunteering at Micah Ministry, which is where they pair up or kind of collaborate with a religious organization to pack food, meals, and care packets for the homeless and those in need. So they are making the world better. That's the human hands solve human problems. Remember our speaker disclaimer? Well, they have one too, but they just kind of throw it up there, move on from it. It's very similar to ours, but the difference is, the focus here is on please respect the views of our speaker, and if you have any questions, and this is not a forum to start debates, is what they say. Kind of a different twist on what our culture. So here's some of their recent meeting topics, if you want what they go through. Talking about the Kansas City Monarchs, the African American baseball league team. The City of Fountain Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence came to talk, nuns, to talk about their organization. Nazi propaganda and the importance of media literacy. Evolutionary history of world religion, effective altruism, and Amnesty International. You can still make it to Amnesty International if you take off next weekend. So here's my notes about what's different between them and ASF. This is the benchmarking that I'm talking about. So ASF has had, as our focal areas, we kind of have a dual mandate. We've got an activism and a social. We want to stand up for church-state separation, but we're also, meeting on a social basis at restaurants and bars and, making friends and that kind of thing. Oasis is strictly a social organization. They have one mandate, they have one focus, one thing that they do. Key values. ASF does not have anything like those 5 key values that we talked about, whereas with Oasis it's very explicit. Similarly, code of conduct. I think we're optimistic and we expect people to be kind to one another and to do their best to get along. If you come into a social group and you're antisocial, that maybe doesn't make sense to us because our rational brain just breaks. But guess what people do? They can often behave badly. So our code of conduct is very implied and formal. Theirs is written and enforced. We're both 501c3s in terms of our legal structure. Our meetings are monthly on Sundays at 1 p.m. and theirs are weekly Sundays at 11 a.m. So again, they have a much faster cadence, a much more steady, consistent routine that you can incorporate into your life, whereas ASF is kind of every once in a while basis. And also they have a better time. Now, we don't really have the option to meet here at 11 a.m. because there is a group with the UU that meets in this spot at 11 a.m. So that's something that would have to, it would be harder to change. Funding, ASF, we've come up with dues, donations, and a lot of it comes from Kroger Community Rewards. By the way, if you're not signed up for that, please do. Oasis is completely donations. It's not like dues-based. It's not like they send reminders. They just get donations. And I'm like, wow. So, first of all, you've got this building that you've got to pay on a monthly basis a large sum of money, plus utilities and taxes and everything else and repairs. Then you're hiring musicians at $100, maybe $125 every week. So you've got, you know, a lot, you're signing up for a lot of liabilities, and you're just going to hope people donate. Yeah, that's what they're doing, and it's working. So that's kind of, that was kind of an eye-opener to me as a cheapskate. I'm like, you know, I was like, I'm spending money and committing to spending money, and I don't know if the others will I don't know if the donations will come in, but they have confidence and they make it happen. I think this also gives them discipline, because if they're doing things in a way that doesn't pull in the donations, then bad things could happen, right? I asked kind of what their annual budget was, like how much, you know, so let's say 52 weeks at $100, $5,200 for music. Let's say the building costs, you know, maybe another 25 or 30 a year. I mean, they spend, you know, around $100,000 a year as an organization, and that is a level of organizational structure that is like way above where we are at ASF right now. And so that's interesting. That means, you know, I've got to recalibrate expectations about what we can commit to in the future, where we're going, what growth looks like. So I'm not going to make you read all this, but thinking about, you know, the Oasis 5 key values and the code of conduct, ASF has the purpose and mission in our bylaws, and that's sort of our guiding light. It is very activistic oriented. It's got some mention of social, but it talks about as an activist organization. And problem is, you know, unless you get a lot of people together, it's really hard to have an effective activistic organization. So how do you get the people together? Well, by being a better social organization, right? And so for a long time, the idea was if we can be a better social organization, we can be a better activist organization, and the two will live under the same roof, and we'll do things that way. But this is the key thing I learned in my trip to Kansas City, is that Oasis is not, they are not about, you know, activism or, you know, agitation or criticism of religion. They're not a gripe about religion around the table kind of group. They are much more social, much more sociable, much more oriented toward each other and helping each other out. They're about close friendships and about the social side completely. And so does that mean that they just slack off and, you know, don't do anything, any activism? No. It means that when they're in the Oasis context, they put on their Oasis hat and, you know, they're working toward that goal. And then they go home, and then they go into, you know, whatever activism areas that they're interested in as separate organizations. And I thought, well, why would that be beneficial? And then I thought back to some of the trade-offs that we've had to make. You know, some of the most difficult, you know, decisions that ASF as a board has had to make have been trade-offs between, you know, doing the activistic thing versus doing the social thing. Where do we send our resources? Where do we spend our time? You know, everybody's talking about we ought to do this, we ought to do that, and it comes down to that divide, that dual mandate here in this ASF purpose and mission that creates problems where we have to make trade-offs, right? You have dilemmas where you got to give up something to get something else. That comes out with, you know, how we moderate social media. It comes out with, you know, what do we go after this opportunity or that opportunity with our time, and how do we persuade each other to work toward that? And so there's a lot of tension built into the ASF model that I didn't even realize was there. And so some of the challenges that we've had, you know, free thinker is maybe not a super, you know, divisive term that riles people up necessarily, but nobody knows what it means is the problem. And some people will come into our context and interpret it as a free-for-all. And I can behave however I want. I can be a complete jerk. And in this context, that's what they're telling me they can do because I'm being a free thinker, right? Well, free thinker never meant being a jerk. It means free of dogma. It means, you know, enlightenment values. And so this is something that keeps popping up, is that we're not communicating the values that we expect to be upheld within the context of our organizations. We've had problems where, We've had people get into bitter fights at like potluck events about the causes of historical wars. And you walk up to this thing and it's like, oh my gosh, there must be some kind of, lover's triangle here, as passionate as this is. But no, it's some academic subject. It's something about physics. It's something about, electrical engineering or, the federal budget. I mean, like, people are getting into it about just these weird topics, and you're like, why are they doing this? What did they, is this what they came to do? And you realize that when one of those facts breaks out, neither one of those people was coming back because they just had a bad time. And also the 4 or 5 people around them that saw that situation, they aren't coming back either. So you just had this grenade blow up in the middle of your party and knock out, 5 of your members. So that's kind of what happened, and we've never figured out, I guess, the necessity of communicating values. And then as I talked about, activism and social goals, they're always at odds, and a lot of our board meetings, for example, we've gone on and on and on about what we ought to be doing, and ought to be a cuss word. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say ought to, please. It's offensive to me. But when you have a single mandate, when you've got a single focus and a direction, you don't have these kind of distractions. One of the key things I've learned is that we had this false assumption that if we all could just agree on the same label for ourselves, atheist, agnostic, secular, freethinker, go on and on and on and on, and everybody would get their own label and come up with this stuff, and then we would argue about which label was most important. And we've also had long hours spent arguing over labels, and sometimes people get angry because they feel dismissed for their label, and it's like, so the interesting thing about Oasis is that they are like a label-free group. They are the anti-label. They gave up on that whole fight rather than fight it out. And why is it called Oasis? Because that doesn't involve a label. It could be, it is an oasis. It is like an island of reason in a little, in a zone that maybe doesn't have any other. But they're not fighting over what to call themselves, and they're welcoming of a lot of people. In practice, they're 100%, secular. There's not any woo going on. There's no, pseudoscience. Nobody's selling supplements at the door or anything like that. But the whole fight over labels, it was a meaningless distraction in the first place, and that's a lesson that I took to heart, and I'm done with labels. So I hope that you can consider that as well. So we brought these findings to our board meeting, and kind of recognizing the necessity for change, right? If you don't see the need for change, then you're kind of discredited. If you don't see the need that things have to be different, and that you have to try new things and have to keep growing and have to keep looking for new opportunity, then there's no reason to join your organization. It's going nowhere, right? We wanted to be a dynamic organization that starts to change fast and take risks and do new things. And so the options were, we could convert ASF, into more like an Oasis-like organization. We could strive to become an Oasis. %, focused on activism, so it has one focus. And then the Oasis side, 100% focused on social, it has one focus. No more distraction no more arguing about what we ought to do, this and that. And that was the direction that we eventually decided to take as number 2. So we're going to spin off a Little Rock Oasis and get one started here. And while we were in Kansas City, they were kind enough to give us a startup kit with kind of a project plan to establish your new one, and what all goes into that, and what prerequisites you need to have before you, wind up or crank up your first meeting. And so we've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to take. Next steps is the main thing that we need to do is recruit 5 or 6 additional volunteers to be on the formation committee. We've got a sign-up sheet back there if anyone wants to join our committee. But really, all that it takes to start an Oasis is, maybe 6 to 8, maybe a dozen really dedicated people who are willing to make it happen every week. Work really hard for that initial time, recruit more people, and get this ball rolling. And eventually you get to the point where you've got enough folks where you can have that sign-up sheet where everybody has a little job, where you've got a lot of dedicated people. And that means, I'd like to table at farmers markets, street fairs, events, festivals, that kind of thing. We need to fill in roles like president, treasurer, the speaker finder, the music finder. We're going to be starting up social media and a startup website as part of this, looking at getting a group started. Kansas City, they started on Reddit and started recruiting people through that. So we'll try that route too. I understand there's suddenly been a mass migration to the new social media site called Blue Sky. Might have to get into that as well. And I'd like to raise at least $5,000 from external sources as that team's first project, kind of to build that team, flex our muscles so that we can do something. And so those are kind of where we're going, and I think it's going to be quite an adventure. I think that a lot of this is intimidating, like it seems like an intimidating amount of work. It seems like a radical change to the way we think, but again, change is necessary. We can't pretend that it's not. We can't pretend that things can go on the same way as they have forever, because we want to be successful and we want to go new places. So next, I think, Jim Lindsley and I will camp out up here on these chairs, and Jerry will pass the mic around, and I think we just want to get a conversation going with the audience and us, and we can go over some of the frequently asked questions and so forth that is, about Oasis and about what we learned. And we're certainly not experts, and we might give you some false leads on some of these questions, but the oasisnetwork.com website that I'm showing here will fill in a lot of the rest. So, without further ado, anybody have questions?
One of the noticeable differences in the table you had there between ASF and Oasis was that they have a written and enforced code of conduct. And the code of conduct list that you had there included no illegal activity. Does this mean they kick people out for smoking weed or getting an abortion in Kansas?
If it's on the stage, yeah. If it's in the event of, I think they're talking about illegal activity within the conference or the facility itself. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess it's probably a matter of interpretation, because I think a few years ago you could have written bylaws or a written code of conduct and just said illegal activity, and most of the things that were illegal were agreed upon to be wrong. Maybe in the future we don't have that simple handle to say, doing things that are wrong, and maybe illegal activity would be something. Maybe the main thing that a social organization is concerned about is not somebody's pot habit, but more like somebody selling a multi-level marketing scam to members, or somebody, committing acts of sexual assault, or somebody, doing petty theft or little illegal things like that. So there's a lot of pitfalls, a lot of ways that an individual can exploit a group for their own selfish purposes and sort of drain the group of energy, funds, whatever, rip people off in various ways. And I think that may be the bigger concern there. It would come down to, enforcement. I personally highly doubt that they're, giving blood tests and checking for potheads or something, or, reporting people to the regime for abortions, but.
There's not gonna be an Oasis police, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the whole gist is, it's about how people within the group treat other people within the group. It's that internal constitution.
It also be,
Yeah.
but that's different than saying illegal and enforced.
Yeah,
Is a criteria.
I mean, we didn't see anybody smoking pot. I don't know if we were done, but it's hard for me to imagine that being a priority.
That hasn't been a big activity that I've observed in this group. I personally was a lifelong daily pot smoker. And I quit some years back because of my heart, but I engaged in illegal activity. And I think the laws are what are wrong, not what I did. Certainly in Kansas, I'm not sure what their abortion laws are, but I suspect they're pretty strict. And violating those, I don't think is wrong.
Yeah.
I'd have to assume that's within, I'd have to assume it's within the context of an Oasis event. It's within the building, at a meeting, or tabling somewhere. And what I go off and do, if you go out and smoke pot, no one's gonna worry about it if it's not directly affecting Oasis. I would have to see it in that kind of context.
And I would also think that it's probably based on whether or not it's harmful to other people. If you're having an abortion, you're doing it to yourself. If you're smoking pot, you're probably doing it to yourself, with the exception of whoever's close enough around you to breathe your smoke. But, you know, if you're stealing from other people, that's something you're doing to someone else. So maybe it's more of a, don't do illegal things to others.
I think there are easy ways to make rules about it.
Okay, well, I
What's
think it's pretty obvious.
wrong,
I
A lot
think,
easier than saying what's going to be illegal.
I think it's pretty obvious that the Boys Club and all the other organizations pretty much in the world have basically the same idea that, you know, if you're going to commit some sort of crime in front of everybody in the organization, then that's going to be a problem. I don't think that's really, I think we go any further in depth, it's not going to be of significance to really concern yourself with.
Yeah.
I think there's something that, well, there's several things I'd like to approach, but go ahead. And does anybody else have any questions yet?
What kind of time frame are you looking at to get this established?
I'm looking more at benchmarks than timeframes. It depends, you know, so you can't start until you have a key number of things done. You need some money in the bank. You need your team committed and ready to go. You need to, you know, have some speakers and musicians booked out, you know, at least a few weeks in advance. You need to have all that ready before you throw your first meeting, according to the Oasis. Now, the startup guide was sort of intended for people who are starting from scratch with nothing, right? Starting a brand new organization, not a member of a current organization, don't have any backing or any networking that they could do within a current organization. So really, we've got some key advantages compared to those folks who are just starting with nothing, because we've got ASF, you know, we've got a mailing list, we've got a social media presence, we've got, you know, a name brand around town that you could say, and we've got hundreds of folks actually in the periphery on social media, on our mailing list and whatever, who aren't here today. And why aren't they here today? Well, there's something about ASF that is different than what would appeal to them. They signed up, they appeared at one point in time, but they're not here today. And I think, you know, Oasis is a different and another pitch to them. It's like, well, okay, you didn't like this, but maybe you'll like that. So, yeah, I think it's more benchmark based. The sooner we can get the folks together, do that fundraiser, and get the basic, you know, block and tackling done, I think that's as soon as we can start. Now, I understand SMART goals, and I know a goal without a time frame is kind of useless. It's kind of like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds someday.
Really? That's
Someday.
good.
Someday.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
But don't talk to me.
But yeah, without saying like in 6 months from now, so what, right? But yes, I am thinking within 6 months. I would like to have Oasis weekly meetings starting by May or June, and that's going to be a lift. And I think the hardest part, maybe not the hardest part, but the most critical part is finding some fresh new volunteers who are interested in this.
I'd like to speak to some of the practicality of it all. I know probably 100 people that are go to church and are not religious. There's a lot of people that believe in, or maybe I should say, understand science, but they don't understand mythologies and how that actually relates to them. And I think there's a large group of people out there that are like that. There are problems with it because they have families and other people that they have to commit to in order to just get by in their livelihood. And but because of that, I think there's a lot of people that would have this inclination to go approach an organization that is more secularly oriented and possibly bring in some of their family as well. It's a standard in American society that you got to go to church at Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. You know, that's just the way it is in many families. And that's not just today's family, but on down the line or up the line from where they came from. And so it's kind of expected that they have to go to church on Sunday. Well, if they have an alternative, I think this is a great alternative to that, because you don't have to go in and wonder about this mythological thing that was up on a tree or something, shall we say. And you're able to utilize more scientific and secular ideas to facilitate your family growth and everything like that. And that's one reason why it's suggested that you have it on at Sunday at 11 o'clock. Everybody's familiar with that.
Yeah, really, they opened up that time slot for us. You know, so, well, everybody else is out. This is time for you to do something that, you know, none of the businesses are open and so forth.
But basically, it's something that's inbred in society, that this is something that you need to do for your family and everything. And I think it folds right into what we're talking about. There's one of the things that they suggest is having a facility and having this every week. And that seems to be a big problem to some people. And I think what we just need to do is find that facility. That facility could be any kind of in a strip mall. Could be just a bay in a strip mall, or maybe multiple bays in a strip mall, just depending on how big it is to begin with and how much you want to do. And I think one of the big problems with this kind of thinking is when you've got finances. The way that Kansas Oasis did theirs is they had some funds. They had more than we had. But my point is, they didn't have to go out and, it was said that they bought this church. They didn't buy this church. One of their members bought this facility, and from my experience, we've flipped houses before it was called flipping. And there are many other options other than just going out and you buying this daggone church, or just going and buy this facility or whatever. If you have some bigger members in your organization that are investors, they can invest in something like this. That's what happened here. An investor found this facility that was a great facility. They also found a party, which was Oasis, that had the ability to come up with a monthly payment and some other resources to do this. So in other words, what I'm saying is you don't have to have $500,000 to start to have a facility for you to utilize. You don't have to have it. What you have to have is you have to have a few committed people in the organization and somebody that is willing to do this kind of a financial arrangement, which they're in it for the profit.
Really off. I mean, yeah, it's a good point. Is that like, so Kansas City Oasis, they started out like 10 years ago, and they were meeting in library rooms just like ASF, used to do. They were meeting just wherever they could find. They moved like 3 or 4 times, and they never had their own space, and most of these don't. Like, they're the only ones that have bought their own space. And so it's usually like community center, rec room, whatever, library, whatever, free community space you can get. And they survived like that for years. In terms of the person who bought their building, I mean, really, if you've got somebody lined up to make the payments, maybe they donated some down payment money, but really it's like lending your credit out. Like, if you got good credit and you can take on more debt without damaging your credit, then you can just sign the line and let the group pay for the note.
Let me give you an example, which I semi-proposed to the ASF about a year or 2 ago. There was a facility in North Little Rock in Park Hill, a really nice area, and it had like 3 apartments in it, and it had a facility that was basically a large, what would you call it? I don't know. It was. I say large. It was probably the facility for ASF meeting would probably be 600 to 1,000 square feet. Plus, it had 3 apartments that were paying for the property, for the rent on the property, and that was for sale. And somebody bought it, but it wasn't ASF. But what did happen is after they bought it, they took that property and they sold it to somebody else. So my point is that there are opportunities out there that can not only provide a place for ASF or Oasis group, but it's also a possibility that that person who invested in that can make an even better profit by selling it, and possibly contribute back to Oasis more.
Yeah, and that would be years down the road for us. So, I think we should expect the same kind of bumpy path of finding new places and that sort of thing as we go, and unless this spot opens up at 11 a.m. But I asked about, we've got a really great deal going with being able to borrow space at 1 p.m. And it's like, do you think that's really that big of a barrier for people? And everybody cringed. It's like, 1 p.m., that's a tough time. So maybe this is a big deal.
I want to apologize for coughing. I just got over pneumonia. Geez, yeah, I'm not contagious. Believe me. Okay. But
Is the name Oasis copyright or trademark? Do they have any requirements for calling yourself that?
They do have a chapter agreement where if you're going to use the name, you do agree to certain terms, none of which are onerous or anything. But yeah, it is kind of like an organization set up to have chapters where you agree to, abide by the rules of and the values of the organization. And that's sort of like your question about illegal actions. If you're going to start something like this, you really have to protect your organization from, going off the rails and people taking it off the rails in a different direction. So, maybe somebody says, I want to start an organization. I'm going to use your name. I'm going to start an organization, and it turns into, I guess a bunch of people smoking meth or something. Well, that's what that agreement is for. Or maybe it turns into, a drug dealing circle, or maybe whatever it is. You can imagine people could potentially abuse the name of your organization, ruin your reputation, and that happens in the real world. So they do have some guidelines to protect what they've built.
you have to protect your name.
I have a couple comments. First of all, I read in the newspaper, and this is about organizations, a little bit off, but there was a movie on Netflix called Join or Die. I don't know whether any of you have seen it, but it's an hour and 45-minute movie about organizations in the past and how worldwide membership in organizations is going down, and it's applicable to a lot of organizations I belong to, you know, where membership goes off and ways to bring it back up. The second thing is with the Toastmasters, we have to... music. With Toastmasters, every club has to vote a new member in. And the reason for this is that Toastmasters ran into problems where they get some yokel who comes into a club and he said, well, you didn't vote me in, so you can't vote me out. It brings legal action against Toastmasters. So every person in there has to be voted in so they can be voted out. So that might address the thing you were. But this other movie, I watched the whole thing, and it's called Join or Die, and it's really good.
I might have to check that out. It's really, and your Toastmasters example is something I get on a personal level because ASF spun off a Toastmasters group in the past, like prior to the pandemic.
Oh, what was it?
Free Speakers Toastmasters.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, we kind of folded during the pandemic, and it was a struggle. And when we said that we were a Toastmasters club for free thinkers, let me tell you, that's where the free-for-all came in. We had folks coming in with like, wasn't there a guy with like a magic radiation machine that cured all diseases or something? And
You had it down at the library downtown.
yeah, and like a lot of folks trying to sell pseudoscience to us would come in there, and if not literally trying to sell stuff. And it's like, you know, there's just so many pitfalls, so many people out trying to make a quick buck at the expense of what you're trying to build that, yeah, I agree. Like, you know, there should have been a vote to be like, yeah, maybe I've heard enough from this individual because it's always the same conspiracy theory.
Well, I was in Toastmasters for 25 years. In fact, I was district governor. I was district governor of District 43. And we had a whole bunch of different rules, and I'm well aware of trying to start new clubs because it's hard. In Toastmasters, you had to have 20 people in order to actually become a club, and it's not that easy with any organization. And Toastmasters actually has something that provides something to the people, and it wasn't just environment, but it was speaking skills and leadership skills. And so that's one of the selling points of Toastmasters and why people would tend to go there with it. But it's, you know, there are clubs, a lot of the clubs, it was like we were on the dying breath. You know, some clubs were wild, we had 50 people at every meeting, and other clubs, they peter off until you have, I was in a writers organization here in town, and it was the same type of thing. We used to have big meetings, but people, you know, for one reason or another, it was hard to get people to come and talk about what was going on. And it's not that easy to start an organization.
No, it's definitely not. And these are not easy times for social organizations. Nobody's, you know, people will, you know, you look at your phone, how many hours did you spend looking at your phone? A lot of folks, it's 3 or 4 hours a day. Maybe some people are 8 hours a day, and it's like, okay, that's where your time went. That's why you don't have time to meet up with friends, and you don't have any friends. That's why you aren't in Toastmasters learning skills. That's why you aren't, you know, becoming a leader and respected in a group or organization. It's why you aren't making a difference, and why, you know, you're kind of just sort of tethered to the internet. And so yeah, it's tough times, but I think a backlash is going to come because it can't get much more ridiculous than it is now. And I think that we've got to be ready for that backlash so that we are there ready to bring in a generation of people who are done with being iPad kids or as adults.
Yeah, I really encourage you to watch that Join or Die on Netflix. You know, I have to have wisdom tooth pulled, and so I go out to the thing and they say, well, if we put you under, you might have to have somebody take you home. And, you know, you have a friend take you home. And I'm trying to think, who's my friend?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we're going to need to have is volunteers. And you had a list up here, and I had a few things I wanted to add to it. One was we need a facility finder, an accountant, and a web and media person, and volunteers.
Yeah.
Volunteers to, because, you just can't do much of anything without people that want to do it. You've got to have volunteers.
And you also need,
They're committed.
yeah, you also need more people who are committed, because it's kind of like nobody wants to go first. Nobody wants to be the most committed person in an organization, if nobody else is, because, I mean, then it feels like, you feel like you're being exploited, right? You feel like everybody else is slacking off and you're pulling all the load. But, two things, you have to make pulling the load rewarding in itself and fulfilling in itself. And some of that may come from a commitment to the mission. Some of that may come from the way it's done in a fun way. There's oftentimes a fun way to work and a very not fun way to do the same work. And so the more people you have involved, that, like working hand in hand alongside your friends is fun. Doing everything by yourself is not fun. And it's kind of like a who starts first puzzle, right? Where if you want other people to do it, then you have to do it yourself. And you have to, show dedication yourself, and then somebody else will join you, and that'll make it a little better on you because you can do that together, and then somebody else will join, because now you've got a group of 3 people that have fun doing the hard work together. And, you go from there. But likewise, it goes in the opposite direction as well. As you have fewer and fewer people involved, the work concentrates on fewer and fewer people, and it becomes less fun. So it's a dynamic to be aware of, and that's why I speak in terms of energy. This is an energy problem, and what social organizations are having is an energy crisis. The time that we spend on electronic devices, on passive consumption of media, has taken a lot of the energy and shoved it somewhere else, and taken it out of the social organization sphere. That's good in some situations, because a lot of these social organizations are awful, but it also sets us back, because we have to beat that threshold. We have to be more rewarding than watching Kardashians or whatever. You have to have a bigger dopamine hit from working hard with your friends to build something than you get from social media, and that's tricky, because you're fighting against an organism that's constantly adapting, constantly getting better at drawing people's time and attention. So that's the dynamic, and this is part of why when I think about Oasis meeting weekly, I'm like, man, do I really want to sacrifice every weekend? But really, when you get enough people, they don't have to sacrifice every weekend. There's people that skip, and they don't have to worry about going to hell or anything. So, but they also want to be there. So it's got to be a really good reason, why that would pull them away from that. Like the family camping trip or whatever has to be really good for them not to make it to Oasis on Sunday.
Do we have any more questions or any? Yeah.
Hey, as a kind of a new member or interested party, just curious what your vision is for what's going to remain behind in ASF. Could you, for example, share some of the activism efforts that you've had in the past and what you might prioritize for the near future?
Well, we already have the December, or what's it called?
Solstice display.
The solstice display, which is going up when?
Yeah, that's the immediate thing. December 8th, I would say. Is 8th Sunday? Yeah. So yeah, check meetup.com. That's one thing that we got going on. And then there's a takedown January 5th. And both of those are scheduled so that we might go out for a snack or lunch or whatever afterwards. It's usually an entertaining time for getting hands-on.
If you're not familiar with what solstice display is, maybe you should explain that.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's a counterpart to the Christmas trees and events.
Well, it's a counterpart. Well, it's a display on the Capitol grounds, which is a response to them allowing a Christian display on Capitol grounds. I mean, if you're going to allow one, you need to allow everybody. And from my perspective, if you did that, have you ever been to New Orleans and seen one of their cemeteries? The water level there is, I mean, the groundwater level is so high that they have to make the crypts have to be above ground. And if you do that, I can just imagine the entire state capitol grounds being like that. And so it's a response to the allowing just one religious organization to be able to have a setup up there. And so we're putting that up there, and we could use some help with that.
Yeah, always.
Certainly.
And, I view it as kind of like a service to the state of Arkansas, the people of Arkansas. This is something that the Arkansas Society of Free Thinkers provides for free, that provides representation for hundreds of thousands of Arkansans who don't subscribe to the other dogmas that are monumentalized on the Capitol grounds. So it was a long, hard fight, but we did it. And what the solstice display is, it's kind of 6 panels of information, kind of arranged in a hexagon column, and it's got various things written on it: book recommendations, organizational recommendations, philosophy, science information, kind of reaching out with a lot of stuff. And we worked really hard to design it and build it and fundraise for it and everything else. And so we set it up every year on the Capitol grounds, and that is one of our ways of letting it be known that yes, free thinkers do live here, and we are organized, and we are demanding church-state separation. In terms of directly to your question of how does ASF maintain its energy, this was one of the main questions I had going into Kansas City. It's like, okay, if you guys are 100% social, how does that work? Does just everybody give up on any activism or any change the world kind of attempts? And definitely not. But like I said, they put on one cap when they're at Oasis, take it off, put on another cap when they're in their activistic activities.
They're involved in soup kitchen, and because it's a secular organization, they were working with a religious organization, with a soup kitchen. And because of that, they found out that the religious organization found out that this was a secular organization, so they banned them from helping with that. So they just went to another organization that said, hey, yeah, we'd be glad to have you guys, atheists or whatever you are. And that's something I like to say is that I consider myself an atheist, and I have lots of friends that are like Christian, or I have one really good friend of mine is a Methodist minister. He's retired now, and I know several other Methodist ministers. But we all cohabitate. But they go to a church, and some of them are the preachers of the church. But we all cohabitate, and we all understand that there are things that we all have in common. And one of those things is separation of church and state, because I know this Methodist minister over here and this Church of Christ minister over here, they don't want the Catholic Church, erecting their symbol in front of their church or on public ground. So everybody, we all have that in common, and that's kind of why we do the winter solstice display thing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, you never know how it's going to go. Each organization has to adapt and find its way. And Oasis offers a lot of flexibility within their organizational model for you to do what works within your own community, to try new things, to experiment, to find new sources of that energy that I'm talking about. Similarly, the ASF side probably needs to change, needs to adopt some of these best practices that we've discovered, and maybe focus itself on one task instead of two, for example, once the social is off. But Kansas City Oasis actually emerged out of another group, Kansas Kansas City
KCO.
Atheist Coalition,
Yeah, KC.
something like that.
KCOA, or something, anyway, that was an
Yeah.
atheist group, just like ASF.
So KCAC is still around and still an activism-focused organization. Meeting up.
KCAC.
Yeah, and you can find them on meetup.com too, and you know, drop in on their events. But I think that they're more successful together, separately, because they can pursue with 100% energy their individual missions, instead of always being torn between and generating a lot of internal friction between which way do we go. And like I said, there's people put on one hat and they take off another as they go in and out of these organizational roles. And the way the organizations are set up is that they provide, you know, written, you know, values and guidelines about how you are expected to act in this context, and then you leave that context, do whatever you want. You can go and, you know, get into an activist group that shouts things and holds signs, but within the context of the group, it is sort of mutually decided to do these things. And that may seem oppressive to some folks. That may seem like it's too much to expect, and I'm too free to agree to any rules. But I think about the alternative. Think about how we've, you know, argued over labels over many years. Labels are oppressive. If you want everybody in the organization to call themselves the same label, when maybe that doesn't fit very well, that's at least as oppressive as, you know, what's going on in various churches, where probably 5 to 10% of the people, according to polls, don't believe in God. But they go to church and they call themselves that label. Well, they have to call themselves that label because that's what you have to do to be a member of that social organization. So it's always a trade-off. It's always something, but I think they show the way in that you've got to have dedicated, separate organizations, and your organization needs to have one goal, not two.
Is this group still doing street cleanup?
You know, we lost our adopted highway that used to be on Highway 10 right here in downtown. You know, they kind of, you know, said that wasn't going to be up again for renewal. And then we tried to apply for another couple of places, and we're kind of gotten silence. And I don't know if that's because somebody's afraid of the political accountability of approving a sign, or if that is because of just, you know, them not, the folks who manage that not being super diligent with following up with us, or maybe it's our own fault. But we're still working on that, and still working to find a highway that's, you know, within reasonable distance of most of us.
I used to go to them all the time, every time it was cleanup.
Yeah.
I can't anymore.
You know, we got a dozen loose ends like that that somebody, you know, needs to follow up on, and we just kind of, you got to have enough people to be able to cover that kind of thing.
Any more questions? Or opinions or anything? Jerry?
I don't have a whole lot to add. I want to say one thing about the activism. Activism is something that you've just got to pick your battles wisely and then go after the right way. In the history of this organization, we've had some wins and a few losses, but we've had some good activism. If you remember the Westboro Baptist Church, they came to Little Rock to protest, and they came on September 19th, which is the holiest day in the Pastafarian calendar. And so we arranged to have a spot right across the street from them, and it was on Talk Like a Pirate Day, and so we kind of had our Talk Like a Pirate signs until the Westboro people showed up, and then we flipped our signs over to a bunch of anti-Westboro Baptists. That was one of the most fun days that I've ever had. You know, one thing that about putting the creche, the display next to the creche or near the creche on the state capitol grounds, that wasn't easy. This group had to file a lawsuit, and one got judgment where they had to open it up. If they were going to open it up to the Christians, they were going to open it up to us. And we had a similar lawsuit in Mountain Home, where a pagan group wanted to just put up a Happy Solstice addition to their Christian display. They said no. We sued them. We won. They said, well, okay, nobody's going to do it. They took it all down, which I think was the wrong way to go, but it's what happens. Like I said, you've got to call it, you got to pick your battles wisely and use them. So I don't see ASF, if this division occurs, I don't see ASF as having additional regular meetings or additional, activities. I think it needs to just be a group ready to go the next time we have some, intrusion upon our, the separation of church and state, an intrusion on our rights.
The signs on the buses.
The signs on the buses, that's right. We had I should have remembered that because I was a lawyer, but we wanted to put a sign, "You can be good without God," on the city buses because the churches were all buying signs on them. And all those, they decided not to, and we sued them, and they had a bunch of excuses. And so anyway, we were able to show that this was ridiculous. But one of the things, just to let you know the mindset, one of the defenses that they were making is, we can't put "You can be good without God" on our buses. They'll be destroyed. People will blow them up. And I said, are you serious? I don't have a whole lot of regard for Christians, but I don't think that. But anyway, we didn't have to put up a bond for protection, but in order to do it, but we were allowed to put our banner on the bus for a while. It got around, it got the attention, it needed, and then that went away. There have been instances where things have come up, but that's exactly what you've got to be for an activist group. You can't be activists 24/7 if there's nothing to be active about. Activism needs to be about when something needs to be done. And the social club, Oasis ought to serve that function.
And I agree with you on that. I think, well, hey, anyway.
Oh, that's right, you've got it.
Yeah, I've got it right too. Hey, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. You've got your activist arm, you might say, and it's, if you create a community that is secular people or people that are not related to, that are looking for a secular outlet, then you also have a bigger portion of people to, when something like this comes up, you go, hey, yeah, a lot of people can join that effort. But if we don't have the social community for that to begin with, then we're lacking a little bit of something.
And I think it's important that, from my personal perspective, based on my employment, ASF is absolutely terrifying. I don't want to be in public because it's scary. Because I can lose my job.
Right.
And Oasis sounds a little bit less frightening for me because it gives that social aspect. And if I choose to be part of the activism thing, I can, with the knowledge that that could be an issue, but I don't have to make that choice necessarily,
Right.
Specifically at this point.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, because if you have an activist group, then it's kind of a lightning rod for criticism. It's in the news. You got people doing searches on the internet and who's in it, trying to dox folks. But I think if you're a 100% social organization, then yeah, it gets a lot easier to find speakers, to find musicians, to find venues. If you don't have that friction with society going on. But then again, what happens to the activism in that world? I think you choose to, live in two worlds. You can be a member of both. You can get your social life through this side, and you can work out your activism on this side. And for those who can do one but not the other, or who are interested in one but not the other, you can now have two options. You don't have to compromise and spend your time, arguing about it, or being a member of a social organization that has all these activist downsides, or being a member of an activist organization that has all these social downsides. So that seems to be what works, and it's contradictory to what I thought just 8 months ago. completely changed my mind.
Okay, we don't have any more questions?
We can wrap it up. And for more questions, check the FAQ section on the website here. I've got it up if anybody wants me to expand on these. I thought I did,
You did.
but it fell asleep. I put the computer to sleep. Just do that.
I'm not gonna go there.
I tell bedtime stories from when I'm good. But anyway, thanks everybody for coming out, and check meetup.com for more opportunities to get together. And yeah, please come out and help us with the winter solstice display on Sunday, December 8th at
State Capitol grounds.
Yeah, the Capitol grounds, say 11 or 10.
Uh,
11.
But it's gonna be at the Capitol grounds on the south side of the Capitol.
Yeah, so
You'll,
off of 7th Street, you turn onto the one-way loop, and that's where we'll be parked and set up.
for all
It's the side that faces Children's Hospital.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're familiar with where they put up the Jesus sign every year, it's in that general.
it's in that same island.
Fresh was
Tomorrow's Pint Night, is it not? Pint Night?
Oh, yeah.
Pine's awesome.
Yeah, we've got Pine Night going on, and we also...
And every second Sunday, we get communion. We already have this month. We've got another one next month.
Second Sunday, Catholic Communion at Cantina Cinco de Mayo on the Stagecoach Road at 6 p.m. Yes, be there on E Square.
Very well done.
There you go. Yeah.
Bye.
Elaine,